In the second half of the 20th century, the world was divided into two power blocks. On one side, the United States, a symbol of capitalism. On the other, the Soviet Union, the communist power. It was the Cold War, a conflict without direct battles, but fought in every corner of the planet, with espionage, propaganda, and nuclear threats. But beyond Earth, this war would find a new stage: space. It all began in 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1. A metal sphere with antennas, it silently orbited the Earth, emitting radio beeps that could be heard even by amateur radio operators. It wasn't just a satellite, it was a warning. The entire world realized if the Soviets could launch something into space, they could also launch nuclear warheads anywhere on the planet. The United States was in shock. It was the beginning of the space race. A month later, the Soviets shocked the planet again. Sputnik 2 was launched, carrying the dog Laika, the first living being sent into space. Soviet propaganda painted the achievement as a milestone of science and courage. But behind the scenes, the reality was cruel. Laika did not return. She would die hours later, a victim of overheating. The world applauded, unaware of the tragedy. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Dwight Eisenhower watched American confidence plummet. The press asked, how was the United States, the greatest power on the planet, being defeated in space? The response was immediate. NASA was born in 1958, the agency that would have a single mission: to beat the Soviets in the race for space supremacy. But the Russians didn't stop. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin was launched aboard the Vostok 1 spacecraft and became the first man in space. His phrase, "The Earth is blue," echoed as a triumph. Once again, the Soviets were ahead. Leader Nikita Khrushchev celebrated. Gagarin became a world hero, an icon greater than any general. The United States was being humiliated. But in that same year, a new president entered the scene: John F. Kennedy. Young, charismatic, and visionary, Kennedy issued a historic challenge. In a fiery speech to Congress, he declared, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It was the turning point. The goal was not just to catch up with the Soviets, but to surpass them with an achievement so grand that no one could ever again question American power. Kennedy put all his cards on the table with this declaration. Do you think it was a brilliant gamble or a desperate risk? Leave your opinion in the comments below. And so began the Apollo program, a monumental effort that mobilized hundreds of thousands of scientists, engineers, and military personnel. But the path would not be easy. In 1967, a fire in the Apollo 1 capsule killed 3 astronauts during a ground test. The tragedy shocked the United States. The program seemed doomed, but NASA learned from its mistakes. Every failure was transformed into progress. On the other side, the Soviets were also facing their ghosts. The Soviet lunar program was conducted in a rush, marked by rocket failures, explosions, and deaths hidden by censorship. In propaganda, everything seemed perfect. In reality, the Soviets were stumbling. The race to the moon was becoming increasingly desperate. In 1968, the Apollo 8 mission accomplished something unprecedented. For the first time, human beings orbited the moon. The images of Earth seen from space, a small, fragile, and lonely planet, moved the world. It was proof that the Americans were ready for the final step. And then, in July 1969, it happened. The Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever built, carried 3 astronauts into space: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. The world stopped to watch. On July 20th, Armstrong descended the ladder of the lunar module and uttered the words that would go down in history forever. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. In that instant, the United States won the space race. The American flag planted on the moon was not just a scientific symbol, it was a political statement. Capitalism had triumphed over communism on the grandest stage possible, space. But the story doesn't end there. What few people know is that the space race was marked by dark secrets. Failed tests, disappeared Soviet cosmonauts, covered-up deaths. There are records of cosmonauts who were allegedly sacrificed in experimental flights, whose names never appeared in history books. Conspiracy theories emerged, claiming that the Americans never landed on the moon, that everything was filmed in secret studios. For some, it's just paranoia. For others, a clue that the Cold War manipulated even the stars. And you? Which side of this story are you on? Do you think the conspiracy theories about the moon are just rumors, or is there something they never told us? The fact is, after Apollo 11, the Soviets never reached the moon. Their lunar program was abandoned, and the USSR focused on space stations. The United States conducted more landings, but over time, public interest waned. The last man left the moon in 1972. Since then, no human has returned. The space race ended without applause, won, but also forgotten. Today, looking back, the space race is more than a superpower rivalry. It was a chapter that showed the best and the worst of humanity. Courage, sacrifice, technology, and also propaganda, lies, and death. But in the silence of space, something remains. The moon still holds the human footprints, solitary and untouched. A reminder that in the midst of a war without bullets, humanity dared to dream higher than ever. And perhaps one day, this race will begin again, not between communism and capitalism, but between nations, corporations, and even billionaires. Because space continues to be the next battlefield, and who knows, the next stage for human destiny. The first space race changed the world, but the new one is already happening. If you want to understand who the new players are and what's at stake, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video on the topic.